Rachel Boillot, as mentioned. I'm a photographer based in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a real pleasure to be here in Portland today. Thank you all for welcoming me. So I wanted to start out today with a quote from Rebecca Solnit, who's brilliant. Everything should start with a quote by Rebecca Solnit. Solnit begins, "What's your story? It's all in the telling. Stories are our compasses and architecture. We navigate by them. We build our sanctuaries and our prisons out of them. And to be without a story is to be lost in the vastness of a world that spreads in all directions like Arctic tundra or sea ice. To love someone is to put yourself in their place, we say, which is to put yourself in their story, or figure out how to tell yourself their story. Which means that place is a story. And stories are geography. And empathy is, first of all, an act of imagination, a storyteller's art, and then a way of traveling from here to there. So I wanted to start with that quote today, as lengthy as it is, because miles of meaning are contained in that. And I really wanted to start with that because I believe photography is a storyteller's art. Even if the photographs themselves they rarely divulge the full story, but it is a narrative art. And today I'll be telling you my story, my way of traveling from here to there. So I wanted to briefly share two works with you today. The first body of work I'm going to show today is called Postscript. I first read about the dilemma of the United States Postal Service in 2011. Thousands and thousands of post offices were closing their doors, I read. And I was immediately struck by this story. I had absolutely never considered America without its post offices. Like some of the best photographic subjects, it was something I had taken for granted. Post offices are so ubiquitous that they had ultimately become invisible to me. And suddenly, I wanted to spend some time looking. And I believe that the real reason this story resonated with me was because, when I thought about the dying art of letter writing, I couldn't help but think of the parallels to my own field of photography. It was at a moment when I was reflecting a lot on the analog to digital transition in photography, and I was personally feeling impacted by it. I still shoot film with a 4x5 large format view camera, and thankfully the film I use is still available, but parts of my practice have become extinct, even in the short period of time I've been working as a photographer. And I couldn't help but think about how these threatened post offices were symbols for the communications of a past era. And I couldn't help but think about how this was similar to some of what I was experiencing as a photographer in the digital age. And then once I started thinking about it, I realized how alike photographs and letters truly are. From the moment a letter is sealed, or the shutter is clicked, both objects bring messages from a past moment into our present, traveling through time and space. I ended up making this a photographic project by focusing on some of the most threatened zip codes in the American South. I discovered that there were rural communities that were literally closing, when they lost their post office, they were losing their zip code. They were losing their place on the American map when the post office closed. And so I traveled to these affected communities and I photographed there. And so the zip code, the numerical identity of place, became my window on the rural South, a region that was entirely new to me at that time. I'm originally from New first moved south to pursue my master's at Duke University. And this was my first time working in the rural South, a region that has been especially affected by these. Southern literature also provided a framework for this story. And as you can tell by the fact that I started with a quote by Rebecca Solnit, I'm really influenced by literature and writing, and that's constantly providing a framework for my thought process. How many of you are familiar with the work of Eudora Welty? Okay, so she became like the muse for this project. I think she is just absolutely brilliant. As I set out to make work in a new region, reading the work of female authors from this place guided me through a new landscape. And Eudora Welty's short story, Why I Live at the P.O., is arguably the best literary work ever to take place in a tiny little rural post office. So as I searched for these threatened post offices and disappearing zip codes, her words encouraged me. Like this quote, "There's more mystery in it than I know how to say." Because that's the challenge right there. There is more mystery in the world than I know how to say. Yet as an artist, I must try to speak. My challenge is to harness the mystery in my pictures without robbing the world of its magic. So I should note, so this is a photograph from the Mississippi Delta. This is the community of Pantherburn. Because this project really became about place, it's really important to me that all of these images are titled by zip code and the name of the place. So for example, this one is Carroll, Mississippi 38630. The zip code really became the conceit that's driving this body of work. So like I said, I moved south to pursue my master's at Duke. Postscript was my graduate thesis work. So when I wasn't in class, I drove around the rural South looking for post offices. For a time there, that was my story. And then I graduated, and I was lost again. I was without a story. Perhaps more than a story, many would argue I needed a job. I suppose I needed that, but really what I needed was a story, something to live for. I'm lost without a photography project, I really am. I'm someone that needs to always be making work to be happy. Because photography is my way of making sense of the world. So what happened next? I got this curious commission upon my graduation. It was a postgraduate fellowship to be photographing for 2 months in Tennessee. I have to be honest, I knew very, very little about what I was to be doing. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I vaguely understood that I'd be photographing in Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau region and working for a park ranger. And really, that was enough for me to be enthusiastic about it. I mean, I was going to be supported to make my artwork. That's all I can ask for. So, sold. I was sold on the project, my next story, my way of traveling from here to there. This can show you more specifically where the Cumberland Plateau region is. So, Tennessee, here I come. I arrived both enthusiastic and absolutely clueless about what I was getting into. On my first day of work, I met Park Ranger Bob Fulcher, head of the Cumberland Trail State Park, my boss for the summer. I still had no idea why a park ranger wanted a photographer, but you know, it was a gig. I needed a gig. So Bob explained his vision to me. Bob believes that preserving cultural resources is just as important as preserving natural resources. And furthermore, he believes that the most precious gift Tennessee has to offer is its musical heritage. So although it's a stretch, I mean, it's a big old stretch from what most park rangers are interested in doing, this man, Bob Fulcher, has built a career cultivating and preserving musical heritage in the region, while literally building Park Trail. As he travels to remote pockets of the state, securing land for the park system, he searches for stories and songs. And his latest initiative was that he had launched a record label. So this is a park ranger with a record label, and he's just hired yours truly. So Sandrock Recordings, which is a project of the Cumberland Trail State Park, is the only record label in the entire world that is hosted by a park system. And I was its new staff photographer. Sandrock releases field recordings, so these are generally recordings made at home rather than made in a commercial studio. By and large, these are not artists who have made a living off of their music. They have worked other jobs and simply made folk music because they love it. And they are the bearers of rare traditions. So the only problem with this is that I didn't know anything about old-time music. I was a photographer, not a folklorist or an ethnomusicologist. But I made it my business to learn. So the music was my introduction to this place. The first person I met was Charlie McCarroll, a fiddler from Harriman, Tennessee. This is the photograph I made on that first day, my first day of work, as we sat on his porch. And hopefully the music will work. I'm going to play a tune that he played for me that day sitting on his porch. Cutting in and out, so you get the idea. It's a fiddle tune. So I discovered two things on that first day with Charlie. I didn't know, but I sensed that I had just stumbled upon a treasure trove of stories. And also, I realized I was glad that I didn't know anything about what I had just walked into, or didn't know anything yet. Because sometimes that's the best place to be. Wide eyes, open ears, but watching, listening. And one thing I have learned is that the old-time music of Tennessee is steeped in storytelling. It's a narrative tradition, just like photography, even when it doesn't have lyrics. For example, that tune that Charlie just played, that's titled The Green River March. Charlie's great-grandmother wrote that song when she was on the Trail of Tears, and it's been passed down throughout the family from generation to generation. It's part of, the family's rich oral tradition. I met the exquisite ballad singer Emma Lou Wilson soon after I met Charlie. I photographed her and I made a recording.
Granny would sit out on the porch of the night. In the summertime, it was too hot to go to bed, they didn't have air conditioning. And Granny would sing me all these mournful old songs. Some she couldn't remember all of them. One she couldn't remember all of it, and I remember, oh, little dove, you're not alone. I once like you, I had a mate.
nursing home where Lou was recovering from a broken hip. And she never did fully recover, so that was the last recording that was ever made of her. And she had the most gorgeous, gorgeous voice. So clearly she never did remember the rest of the song, but that fragment of the song that she sang, that has been enough to inspire my imagination ever since. I mean, I almost like not knowing the entire song, not uncovering the full narrative arc. There's something really photographic about that. Just having the barest snippet of a story, an invitation to the mystery, a question that can't be answered. So, long story short, this became my next project. I spent 2 months photographing in Tennessee that first summer, and then I returned to North Carolina. It was the end of, the 2-month gig, that contract. And I had other things lined up. I was supposed to be teaching at Duke University that year. And I did. I went back and I taught at Duke, and I was supposed to stay at Duke. And then I got a phone call from Park Ranger Bob Fulcher. Totally out of the blue. He called me, and after the usual pleasantries, he said, "Rachel, I'm in a bit of a pickle." Bobby said, "I need an audio engineer to run the record label." I replied, "Bobby, I'm a photographer. I'm no audio engineer." But I'd come back in a heartbeat. And lo and behold, I'm not kidding, as soon as I said that, the phone cut out. He's a park ranger. He never has cell phone service. Never, ever, ever. It's infuriating. So after I've just totally put myself on the line, the phone cuts out. Bob was gone. I didn't hear from him for 2 more days. 2 days later, though, he did return the phone call. He said, "Did you say you'd do it in a heartbeat?" Almost incredulously. So before long, that's exactly what I did. I went back to Tennessee, and I spent a few years of my life running a record label for a park ranger. I was camped out in a state park. Housing was part of my contract. So I was in an old FEMA trailer from Hurricane Katrina, running a record label for a park ranger. My parents were a little worried, but I was very happy. And, you can't make this stuff up, right? But it ended up being the best thing for my work. I was so inspired by the music of this place. It inspired me as a photographer. What I heard was inspiring what I saw. I knew I was exactly where I needed to be to make my work. All of these photographs are born of that experience. I ultimately envisioned this work as a visual score to mirror the musical melodies. And the song, well, it's the song of this place. Well, that place, Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau. All the sounds that whispered to me as I listened and explored. And as I thought about how to translate what I heard into the silence of pictures, that which can only be seen. This is Eugene Hensley, a local preacher and gospel musician in Jamestown, Tennessee. That's a town in the Cumberland Plateau that I photographed a lot. Here you see him praying with his parrot Joby on his shoulder. I'll tell you a little bit more about Gene in a few minutes. He comes up again. So my photographs, they're all inspired by the music, but this is, as you can tell just by looking around the gallery, this is not a straightforward documentary project about old-time musicians. Portraits of musicians and their instruments come and go in the work I ultimately made, which is more of a lyrical portrait of place. And the people in these pictures, they really became my adopted family in the region. I mean, especially when I was living in that really awful trailer. I mean, they took me in, they welcomed me, and I was proud to represent them at the record label and work with them on these audio recordings. So this is Opal Sharp Wright, a musician who's also from Jamestown, Tennessee, and she's like an adopted grandmother to me, I swear. This is Rick, Opal's nephew. He goes hunting with, a lot of people ask me about the cat. He goes hunting with Gunsmoke the cat. He does have dogs. He leaves the dogs at home. He has 22 dogs. But he and this cat have a really special bond. That's all I can say. This is my dear friend Michael's kitchen. Michael is the best fiddler I know. I don't know, you probably can't read the inscription in this Bible, but it says, "My first childhood Bible, Evelyn Sharp." This Bible was actually left to me by the guitar player Evelyn Sharp after she passed away. I photographed this Bible on her porch the day after she died. You know, photography is what helped me through the loss, and as you can probably tell, I got to be really, really close with these musicians. And while I was doing this, I was still running the record label. This is one of Evelyn's family members who I photographed on a day when we were doing recording sessions in the park. This is not one of the recordings I released. This is much older than that. This is Tom McCarroll's old record player. You'll meet Tom here in a bit. I had to photograph this. I was so drawn to this record player, illuminated under the window where you could feel the weight of the years. While it's, you could see this light of transcendence. And of course, I'm constantly trying to bring it back to the music, visual evidence of musicianship, while allowing myself to make this lyrical portrait of a place, and constantly also thinking about the role of the land itself. This is another project, like Postscript. This is a project about place and story. Place and story in photography. This is a Cherokee healing ritual where the women sing while covering one another's eyes. This was being performed at a music festival where I went to hear some old-time music and make some recordings, and photograph some friends who were performing there. This is Eugene Hensley, the guy who was praying with the parrot on his shoulder. This is Eugene Hensley again. Eugene's this really interesting character and a very interesting figure in my life. So Eugene is the preacher at the local Jesus Rock ministry, which is it's entirely of his own creation. Eugene plays the guitar when he's not tending to his ministry. He also writes scripture on stones and then gives them away as gifts in the local Walmart parking lot. He's a beloved local figure in the community where he lives. He used to be an opioid addict, but he got clean, and now his mission is to help others. As he has told me time and time again, he wants everyone to know that God loves them and forgives them. His ministry is about forgiveness. He doesn't believe in denomination. He doesn't much like organized religion, frankly. He's sort of an outsider figure that drives around town in his school bus with his parrot and passes out his rock. stops in the Walmart parking lot and plays the guitar. He's Gene. But he's a really sweet guy, and I think this notion of forgiveness, that's really a really integral part of the gospel music. So I really wanted to focus on his ministry as well. As we wrap up here, I'm going to be saying less about the pictures and letting you just experience them. I think I've given you plenty of context by now. But hopefully you've gathered that this is a body of work that moves between visions of the land, religious scenes, and portraits of musicians. That has been how I've traversed this terrain. I think there's a sense of revelation in the work, and that comes directly from the spirit of the music itself. That's something I've really tried to capture in my photographs. This is Evelyn Sharp, who owned that Bible. That was her childhood Bible. This is the first day I met her. I didn't really know her then, but I was really taken with her expression of wonder, just this natural curiosity. And then I saw her kitchen. And that's just a gift for a photographer. This is Evelyn playing her guitar and singing me some songs she wrote. So not only did she leave me her Bible, but she left me all of her old song sheets, both songs she'd written and old standards like Home on the Range. In fact, the end sheets of the book I published, I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to do this one-handed, but the end sheets of my book are copies of her old song sheets. She left me just this treasure trove. Because how it happened really was a few months before she passed. She came over to me in her matter-of-fact manner and said, "Rachel, you're going to do the book on me, ain't you?" And I told her that I'd like to if she'd let me. And she nodded and shoved a pile of papers my way. Her life's work, her legacy in object form, all these song sheets. So my book is dedicated to Evelyn's memory. She and I were really, really close. So close that actually when she did pass away at the age of 96, her family included me in the funeral pamphlet as one of her children left behind. But she had become like this just adopted maternal figure. I don't know if she would be a mother or grandmother. She was 96, but it's just, when I reflect on all this, it really is so amazing to me, the worlds that photography can introduce you to, and how close you can become to people, the connections that can be forged just because you show up with a camera, just because you show up as, a curious, vulnerable observer. It can change the course of your life forever. This is Evelyn's grandson, Forrest, who lived with her and took care of her. He's the only member of his generation in the family to pick up an instrument. So this is very much a tradition that's threatened with the passage of time. And a project he and I are spearheading together is we are actually organizing all of her song sheets and donating them to the Library of Congress's American Folklife Center, because I've decided that it belongs in a more significant repository than, my own archive. This is a work that's really about cultural preservation, in a sense. This is my friend Michael. Inside there is that kitchen with all the pots hanging. The best fiddler. little Curtis Burge, a ballad singer who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was about my height. And he was just as cute as can be. Curtis was born legally blind in the coal fields of Devonia, way up on top of a mountain known as the Noah Doherty Mountain. Because of his poor eyesight, Curtis couldn't attend school. So instead, he just taught himself music. He never could operate a motor vehicle because of his poor eyesight, so he walked everywhere. He was a beloved local figure in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which was where he spent his adult life once he came off of the mountain. And he would just walk around town and he'd set up shop, in various store parking lots or flea markets and perform his music. Everyone loved to hear Curtis play. So this body of work ends in prayer, really. This is Tom McCarroll, the older brother of Charlie, who I had met on that first day of work. Here you can see, right here, this is Tom, and this is Charlie. That's them. Way back, I believe this was 1930. So we're coming full circle here by returning to the McCarroll family of musicians. And the book also ends with seasonal change as the landscape plunges into winter. This is Curtis's cousin, who also walks everywhere. And this is Tom McCarroll in his casket with his fiddle. This is Arch Lake, all frozen over just before the thaw. And this is Curtis Burge on the day of the eclipse. It was actually one of the last times I ever saw Curtis. This body of work is also in memory of him. He's another artist that I represented at the record label. And we put out his first CD ever. And digital downloads now. But anyways, this is a work about memory, human creativity, mortality, legacy, and memory. This is about how photographs and music, how sight and sound testify to our lived experiences and preserve our memories. And this body of work is about how we can use creative media to transport us to another time and place. How the story takes us on a journey. As Rebecca Solnit has said, stories are geography. And place is a story. And what I have just shared with you is my story of this place, my story of Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau. So that's it. Thanks again for being here. Do we have time for questions?
We have time for questions,
Sure.
yeah.
Can we pass this around?
Anybody have a question?
Yeah. Is there a venue up in the Cumberland Plateau that you could show this work? And what kind of reception does it get?
Generally positive. I've showed it. Yeah, I've showed it a lot in the region. So I also made films that go along with this work, and I've screened the films a lot. And I generally try to do film screenings along with photographic exhibitions, or really the book is the best way of getting the work out there, I've found. But yeah, people have been really supportive of the work. The musicians themselves all love it, which means the most to me.
There's an interesting theme kind of going through all the different parts of the stuff that you're talking about, which has to do with the old ways of doing things turning into new ways of doing things. It's I mean, it used to be that if you wanted to listen to music in the evening, you had to make music.
Right.
You know, there wasn't a record label, there wasn't a record, you know.
Right.
And that this whole culture is sort of based on the idea that everybody has to make their own music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you're, in addition to saying, you know, the post office is gone because everybody's sending each other emails, and you know, we're going to do a record label to preserve this music, but the fact that there are records and record labels and now streaming services or whatever
Yeah.
is actually life-threatening to the creation of the music in a way.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting
Yeah.
relationship.
And then photography has this, photography has this interesting role as, documenting what's disappearing, but also what's emerging. It's all really complicated, but I think really exciting. And I think what you said is so true. It used to be that if you wanted to listen to music, you made it, and it was an experience to be shared. And now it's different, and I don't know if that's better or worse, or it's different. Yeah.
Well, I think that part of the appeal of rap music is that it's trying to get back to a place where music is something that people just make,
Yeah.
rather than that they are
yeah.
passive consumers of. I think
Yeah.
there's been a feeling of loss that you're only a listener, not a creator.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
So how do you appraise your sound engineering skills at this point?
Oh gosh. I do an okay job when I have the help of others.
Follow up, how often does Alan Lomax come into conversation when you're doing this work?
All the time. Yeah, as I think you should, Yeah. It's an important reference point. Yeah.
After getting to know the songs and the musical traditions of the plateau, which is the song you like the best, or that it's most dear to you, and if you have any recording of it, we can. I don't know. I'm just so curious
Yeah.
about what the music sounds like, because the images are so musical in the gestures of these portraits, and I have a yearning to hear them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So I go back and forth between whether or not I am more drawn to the fiddle tunes or the ballads. I love some of those old ballads that are sung from memory and just been passed down through generations. They're just amazing stories. But I also love the fiddle tunes that don't have any lyrics or any, vocal accompaniment, and it just takes you on a journey.
Can I make a comment to that? There's a real resurgence of old-time music here in the Northwest. My daughter's an
Yeah.
old-time fiddler, my grandson plays banjo and stand-up bass. They're part of a community that has gatherings all up and down the West Coast, from Vancouver, BC, down to Berkeley, over to Idaho, they go up to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And in January, they have a great big, almost week-long thing here in Portland that you can just go and listen to a whole building full of people, little gatherings in each corner, and stairway and closet, playing this music. So it's very popular here now.
It's meant to be shared. That's why, I think those gatherings are so integral to the music itself, and
They're passionate.
carrying on this tradition.
Yeah.
It's really special in that way, and really unique.
I think that there was a time, maybe in my own childhood, when music was more integrated and even more expected as part of maybe a middle-class education. I think that there was more singing. I just went to see Oklahoma, and revival, of course, in New York. And I realized that I knew all the words. And I had no idea how I knew all the words, but I knew all the words. And I think that in my own childhood, there was some expectation of middle class kids learning to play the piano, learning to play the violin, and that was possible in school with lessons. And I think that that's less and less possible, and the expectation is not either that we sing or that that any of our kids, unless they make a special request, learn not to be virtuosos, just learn a parlor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think music activates the imagination in a really unique way. That, you know, I think music education is so important, and unfortunately, like the arts, that it's not necessarily integral to everyone's education these days.
Yeah, if you look at the sort of dominance in popular music now of African Americans, is because, all in church, they all did music in church. So it's like, yes, it disappeared out of the schools, but for that community, it didn't disappear, and it's led to them being the ones who, I mean, you hear interviews with musicians and singers, and it's like, how did you get started out in church?
Yeah, yeah.
That's where it still is, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. So true.
So are you now, I mean, I know you're here and you're not necessarily lost, but what about the next thing? I mean, are you going back? You still have that job, or are you looking for another photo project?
So my next thing is I joined the team at the Kentucky Documentary Photography Project, which basically it takes the FSA, the Farm Security Administration model, and adapts it to the state level. We're assigned counties, and we're supposed to go out and shoot. And that's, beyond that, we have to find our own subject, each of us on the team. It's been really great for me. My new body of work is based in, a few counties in Kentucky. For me, I'm in Nashville, so I still see the musicians all the time and interact with them. And I mean, like I said, it became an adopted family. I don't represent them at the music label just because, well, really, it's grant funded. In this cycle, there isn't anyone to run the record label. So they still have digital downloads on the website and everything, but it's just the park ranger by himself. But he and I keep in touch, and for me, what I'm most invested in right now, other than making my own work, is teaching, and that's really what I see as being the future for myself. I love teaching photography. It's the best. It's a way of giving back. It's a way of sharing my passion with others. I mean, that's what I want to spend my lifetime doing. So I've really been focusing on my teaching.
I find your portraits to be, in this work, to be super intimate and very present, And I'm kind of, in the story you told of how you got to it and the place that you were at with them, makes me feel like you had this access and you had this entryway into this world. And I'm curious, going forward into like a more formal or less intimate venue like you're talking about with Kentucky, are you noticing that, are you having the same kind of success in terms of accessing people and getting that sort of feeling, that sort of intimacy in the photography?
I was really worried about that. I was really worried about that. Access is so much of it with photography. I was just nervous to start another project at all after having had this really powerful, life-changing experience and working on a project for 4 years, which was longer than I'd ever worked on a project before. But Kentucky's been great. I think what ended up, I realized at the end of the day I'm the same person, and a portrait is all about your interaction with those people, and how they're responding to you and how you're responding to them. And you know, I think when I look at the work I've been making in Kentucky, it feels like me. It feels like my work. So somehow I've found my home there, another foothold there in that project. I think how it happened is I needed to be there and feel really lost and be really vulnerable and get to know people before I even took that many pictures. I spent a lot of time there. I really value the relationships I make through photography, and I think getting to know people in the region I'm working in Kentucky has really been it's what's making the experience valuable to me, like hearing people's stories and really listening. I'm still listening, and I think that makes all the difference.
Thank you.